Michael Thompson stood at the window of his sprawling mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, watching the autumn leaves dance across his meticulously maintained lawn. Despite being one of the youngest billionaires in New England, something was missing in his life. The vast estate, once filled with the warmth of family gatherings and his father's hearty laughter, now felt hollow and cold. His father, William Thompson, had been more than just a successful businessman. He was a pillar of the community, known for his philanthropy and wisdom. William's favorite saying still echoed in Michael's mind. True wealth isn't measured by what we keep, but by what we give away. Those words seemed to mock him now, as he wandered through his empty house, surrounded by luxuries that brought him no joy. The Thompson Industries headquarters in downtown Manhattan continued to thrive under Michael's leadership, but his heart wasn't in it anymore. Board meetings and investment decisions had become mechanical exercises, void of the passion that once drove him. His assistant, Sarah, had noticed the change in him, how he'd stopped attending social events and charity galas that were once fixtures in his calendar. One particularly crisp October morning, Michael decided to take a walk around the estate's grounds. The gardeners were preparing the landscape for winter, and the air was filled with the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke from neighboring properties. As he approached the main gates, something caught his eye, a shadow that seemed out of place among the carefully trimmed hedges. Curious, Michael moved closer. There, partially hidden behind an ornamental bush, lay a dog in terrible condition. Its ribs were visible through matted fur, and various wounds covered its emaciated body. The dog's breathing was labored, but what struck Michael most were its eyes, deep, intelligent eyes that seemed to bore into his soul, pleading for help. For a moment, Michael stood frozen, his father's words echoing in his mind. The dog's condition was dire, and the practical thing would be to call animal control. But something about those eyes, that silent plea for help, stirred something deep within him, a feeling he hadn't experienced since his father was alive. Without hesitation, Michael removed his expensive cashmere coat and carefully wrapped it around the trembling animal. The dog didn't resist. If anything, it seemed to lean into his touch, as if understanding that help had finally arrived. As Michael carried the dog toward the house, his housekeeper, Mrs. Harrison, rushed out with a look of horror on her face. "Mr. Thompson, you can't be serious about bringing that creature into the house. Look at the state of it. It's probably diseased." Other staff members gathered at the entrance, their expressions ranging from concern to outright disapproval. Michael's groundskeeper, Tom, who had worked for the family for over 2 decades, shook his head. "Sir, with all due respect, that dog looks beyond help. The humane thing would be to end its suffering." But Michael wasn't listening. For the first time in months, he felt truly alive, driven by a purpose that transcended quarterly reports and stock prices. He carefully placed the dog on the heated marble floor of his entrance hall, already reaching for his phone to call the best veterinary hospital in Connecticut. As he waited for an emergency response team, Michael knelt beside the dog, gently stroking its matted fur. The animal's tail made a weak attempt at wagging, and in that simple gesture, Michael saw a fighting spirit that reminded him of his father's determination in the face of adversity. "You're going to be okay," he whispered, more to himself than to the dog. "We're in this together now." The dog's eyes remained fixed on him, and for the first time since his father's passing, Michael felt the weight of loneliness lifting from his shoulders. He didn't know it yet, but this moment would mark the beginning of a journey that would transform not only the dog's life, but his own as well. The sound of approaching sirens filled the air, and Michael stood up, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Something told him this was more than just a rescue. It was the beginning of his redemption. The emergency veterinary team arrived at the Thompson estate in record time, their sirens cutting through the crisp autumn air. As they rushed into the mansion, Michael stood aside, watching anxiously as they assessed the dog's condition. The lead veterinarian, Dr. Emily Chen, knelt beside the animal, her face a mask of professional concern. "Mr. Thompson," she said, looking up at him, "this dog is in critical condition. We need to get him to our facility immediately for a full evaluation and emergency treatment." Without hesitation, Michael nodded. "Do whatever it takes, Dr. Chen." "Money is no object." As they carefully moved the dog onto a stretcher, Michael couldn't help but notice the skeptical glances exchanged between his staff members. Mrs. Harrison in particular seemed perturbed by the whole situation. "Mr. Thompson, she began hesitantly. "Are you sure about this? It's just a stray, after all." Michael felt a spark of irritation at her words. "It's not just a stray, Mrs. Harrison. It's a life that needs our help." He turned to follow the veterinary team, leaving his housekeeper looking both chastened and confused. The ride to the Greenwich Veterinary Hospital was tense. Michael insisted on accompanying the dog in the ambulance, his hand resting gently on the animal's side, feeling each labored breath. Dr. Chen worked efficiently, setting up an IV and monitoring the dog's vitals. "He's severely malnourished and dehydrated," she explained as they sped through the streets. "There are also signs of internal injuries and possible infections from his wounds. I won't lie to you, Mr. Thompson. His chances aren't great." Michael nodded, his jaw set with determination. "But there is a chance, right?" Dr. Chen's eyes softened slightly. "There's always a chance. But you need to be prepared for a long and potentially difficult road ahead." Upon arriving at the hospital, the dog was whisked away for immediate testing and treatment. Michael found himself pacing in the waiting room, his mind racing. For the first time in months, he felt truly alive, driven by a purpose that went beyond boardrooms and balance sheets. Hours passed before Dr. Chen emerged from the treatment area, her face grave. "Mr. Thompson, we've completed our initial assessment. The situation is as complex." She led him to a small consultation room and began outlining the dog's condition: multiple infections, severe malnutrition, internal bleeding, and a host of other issues painted a grim picture. "Additionally," Dr. Chen continued, "we've discovered that his back right leg is severely damaged, likely from an old injury that never healed properly. It's causing him significant pain and may need to be amputated." Michael felt his heart sink. "What are our options, Doctor?" Dr. Chen took a deep breath. "We have two paths forward. The first is to attempt to save him. It would involve multiple surgeries, extensive medication, and a long rehabilitation process. Even then, there's no guarantee of success and it would be extremely costly." She paused, allowing the information to sink in before continuing. "The second option is to end his suffering humanely. Given his condition, many would consider it the kindest choice." The weight of the decision pressed down on Michael. He thought of his father, of the lessons in compassion and perseverance he had taught him. Then he remembered the dog's eyes, that spark of life and will to survive he had seen earlier. "What would you do, Dr. Chen, if this were your decision to make?" Michael asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The veterinarian was quiet for a moment. "Professionally, I have to present you with all the options, but personally, I've seen miracles happen. This dog fought hard to survive until you found him. Sometimes that fighting spirit can make all the difference." Michael stood up, his decision made. "Then we fight. Do whatever it takes to save him. I'll cover all the expenses." Dr. Chen nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "Very well, Mr. Thompson. We'll start preparations for surgery immediately." "Do you have a name for him? It helps the staff to have something to call our patients." Michael thought for a moment, remembering his father's love for classic literature. "Huckleberry," he said finally. "We'll call him Huck." As Dr. Chen left to begin Huck's treatment, Michael stepped outside to make a call. Sarah, his assistant, answered promptly. "Sarah, I need you to clear my schedule for the next few weeks. Something important has come up." "But sir," Sarah protested, "the merger negotiations with West Coast Tech are in a critical phase. The board is expecting—" "The board will have to wait," Michael interrupted, his voice firm. "This is a personal matter, and it takes priority. I'll explain later." As he ended the call, Michael looked back at the hospital. He knew he was taking a risk, with his time, his money, and potentially his reputation. But for the first time in a long while, he felt he was doing something truly meaningful. Little did Michael know that his decision to save Huck would set in motion a series of events that would not only change his life, but also challenge the very foundations of his world. As he settled in for a long wait, the first whispers of his actions were already spreading through Greenwich's elite circles, setting the stage for both admiration and controversy. As the sun rose over Greenwich the next morning, news of Michael Thompson's unusual rescue was already spreading through the town's elite circles. The story of the billionaire who had put his life on hold for a stray dog was too juicy for the local gossip mill to ignore. At the hospital, Michael had barely slept, spending most of the night in an uncomfortable chair outside the intensive care unit where Huck was fighting for his life. Dr. Chen had been in and out, providing updates that were cautiously optimistic, but underscored the gravity of Huck's condition. Around mid-morning, Michael's phone began buzzing incessantly. Emails, texts, and voicemails poured in from board members, business partners, and even a few reporters seeking comment on his sudden disappearance from a crucial merger negotiation. He ignored most of them, focusing instead on the steady beep of Huck's heart monitor. Sarah, his ever-loyal assistant, arrived at the hospital around noon, her arms full of files and her face etched with concern. "Mr. Thompson," she began hesitantly, "I've managed to postpone most of your meetings, but the board is insisting on an explanation. They're talking about calling an emergency session." Michael sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Tell them I'm dealing with a personal emergency. That's all they need to know for now." Sarah nodded, though her expression remained troubled. "There's something else," she added, pulling out her tablet. "The local press has gotten wind of the story. It's already trending on social media." She showed him the screen where headlines like "Billionaire's Best Friend, Thompson Hair Saves Stray," and "Merger or Mutt, Where Are Thompson's Priorities?" competed for attention. Michael felt a mix of frustration and amusement. "Let them talk," he said, turning back to the ICU window. "This is more important." As Sarah left to manage the growing PR situation, Dr. Chen emerged from the ICU, her surgical scrubs wrinkled from hours of work. "Mr. Thompson, Huck's made it through the night, which is a good sign. We've managed to stabilize him and treat the most severe infections. However," she paused, her expression somber, "we couldn't save his back right leg. The damage was too extensive, and leaving it would have put him at risk for further complications." Michael felt a pang of sadness, imagining Huck waking up to find himself changed forever. "But he'll live?" he asked, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. Dr. Chen nodded. "He has a fighting chance now. The next 48 hours will be critical, but if he makes it through, I'm optimistic about his recovery." As the day wore on, Michael found himself reflecting on the whirlwind of the past 24 hours. He thought about his father, wondering what he would have done in this situation. William Thompson had always emphasized the importance of using their wealth and influence for good, not just for business success. In the afternoon, an unexpected visitor arrived at the hospital. Gregory Walters, CEO of West Coast Tech and Michael's counterpart in the pending merger, strode into the waiting area, his expensive suit a stark contrast to Michael's rumpled appearance. "Thompson," Walters said, his tone a mix of concern and irritation, "what's going on? We have millions riding on this deal and you're here playing dog-sitter." Michael stood, meeting Walters' gaze steadily. "Gregory, I apologize for the abrupt change in plans, but this is something I need to see through." Walters shook his head in disbelief. "A dog, Michael? You're risking everything we've worked for over a stray." For a moment, Michael felt a flicker of doubt. Was he being foolish, throwing away years of hard work for a sentimental impulse? But then he remembered Huck's eyes, that spark of life that had moved him so deeply. "It's not just about the dog, Gregory," Michael said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "It's about remembering what's truly important. My father built our company on the principle that business should serve a greater purpose than just making money. I lost sight of that for a while, but this has reminded me." Walters stared at him for a long moment, then let out a frustrated sigh. "You Thompsons and your idealism. Fine, you have a week to sort this out. After that, we move forward with or without you." As Walters left, Michael felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He knew the coming days would be challenging, balancing Huck's care with the demands of his business. But for the first time in years, he felt he was on the right path. That evening, as Michael dozed in the waiting room chair, he was jolted awake by a commotion in the ICU. Heart racing, he rushed to the window, fearing the worst. But what he saw made his breath catch in his throat. Huck, still weak and connected to various machines, had lifted his head. And there, in the gentle glow of the medical equipment, Michael saw it again, that unmistakable gleam of life in the dog's eyes. It was a small gesture, but in that moment, it felt like a miracle. As nurses rushed to check on Huck, Michael pressed his hand against the glass, a smile spreading across his face. "That's it, buddy," he whispered. "We're just getting started." Outside the hospital, the first stars were appearing in the evening sky. Unbeknownst to Michael, his actions were setting in motion a chain of events that would ripple far beyond the confines of Greenwich, challenging perceptions and touching lives in ways he could never have imagined. The journey ahead would test his resolve, his principles, and ultimately, his understanding of what it truly means to make a difference in the world. As the days passed, Huck's condition began to improve gradually. Michael split his time between the hospital and hasty conference calls, trying to keep both his new charge and his business afloat. The news of his unorthodox priorities had spread beyond Greenwich, sparking debates in boardrooms and on social media platforms across the country. One morning, about a week after Huck's rescue, Michael arrived at the hospital to find Dr. Chen waiting for him with a cautiously optimistic smile. "Mr. Thompson, I think you'll want to see this," she said, leading him to Huck's room. Inside, Huck was awake and alert, his tail wagging weakly as Michael entered. For the first time, Michael could see the true color of Huck's coat, a rich golden brown, emerging from beneath the matted fur and healing wounds. "He's made remarkable progress," Dr. Chen explained. "His infections are clearing up, and he's starting to eat on his own. We're going to begin physical therapy soon to help him adjust to life with 3 legs. Michael approached the bed slowly, his heart swelling with emotion. Huck lifted his head, those soulful eyes fixed on Michael, and let out a soft whine. Without hesitation, Michael reached out to gently stroke Huck's head. "Hey there, buddy," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "You're doing great." As Michael spent time with Huck, his phone buzzed incessantly in his pocket. Finally, he stepped out to take a call from Sarah. "Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry to bother you, but there's been a development," Sarah said, her voice tense. "The board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow. They're talking about a vote of no confidence." Michael felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He had known there would be consequences for his actions, but he hadn't expected things to escalate so quickly. "Understood, Sarah. I'll be there." As he entered the call, Michael noticed a young nurse watching him curiously. "Excuse me, Mr. Thompson," she said hesitantly. "I just wanted to say what you're doing for Huck, it's really inspiring. My little sister saw your story on the news, and now she wants to volunteer at our local animal shelter." Michael was taken aback by the nurse's words. It hadn't occurred to him that his actions might be influencing others. He thanked her, his mind whirling with new possibilities. The next day, Michael arrived at Thompson Industries headquarters in Manhattan, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, but with visible dark circles under his eyes. As he entered the boardroom, the tension was palpable. Board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, averting their gazes. "Michael," began Richard Hartley, the senior board member, "we've called this meeting because we're concerned about the direction of the company. Your recent distraction has put our entire merger with West Coast Tech at risk. We need to discuss whether you're still fit to lead this company." Michael took a deep breath, looking around the room at the faces of people he'd known for years. Some looked sympathetic, others disappointed, a few openly hostile. He thought about Huck, about his father's legacy, and about the young nurse's words. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," he began, his voice steady. "I understand your concerns. A week ago, I would have agreed with you. I was running this company on autopilot, focused solely on the bottom line, but something changed when I found Huck." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "My father built this company on the principle that business should be a force for good in the world. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that sight. We became so focused on mergers and stock prices that we forgot why we were doing this in the first place." Michael pulled out his tablet and pulled up a series of news articles and social media posts. "In the past week, our company has received more positive press than in the entire previous year. Donations to animal shelters in areas where we operate have increased by 200%. We've been flooded with emails from people asking how they can help, how they can make a difference." He looked each board member in the eye as he continued. "I'm not suggesting we abandon our business goals, but what if we could align our success with making a real difference in the world? What if Thompson Industries became known not just for its profits, but for its compassion?" The room was silent for a moment. Then, surprisingly, it was Gregory Walters from West Coast Tech who spoke up. "I came here ready to walk away from our deal," he said slowly. But I have to admit, Thompson, you've got me intrigued. If you can channel this energy into our merger, we could create something truly revolutionary." As the board members began to discuss the possibilities, Michael felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years he felt truly excited about the future of his company. As the meeting adjourned, Michael's phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Chen. "Huck took his first steps today. I think he's ready to go home." A smile spread across Michael's face. He had a feeling that both he and Huck were on the verge of a new chapter in their lives, one that would challenge them both, but ultimately lead to something extraordinary. Little did Michael know that the true test of his newfound purpose was yet to come, as forces beyond his control were already in motion, ready to challenge everything he was building. The day Huck was released from the hospital marked a turning point for both the dog and Michael. As they drove through the gates of the Thompson estate, Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation and nervousness. He had spent the past few weeks renovating parts of the mansion to accommodate Huck's needs, including ramps to help him navigate with his 3 legs and a specially designed rehabilitation area. Mrs. Harrison, who had initially been skeptical about the whole situation, surprised Michael by greeting them at the door with a warm smile. "Welcome home, Huck," she said, kneeling down to gently pet the dog. Michael raised an eyebrow at her change of heart, and she shrugged. "What can I say, Mr. Thompson? Your dedication has been inspiring." As Huck tentatively explored his new home, Michael settled into his home office to catch up on work. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of business restructuring and new initiatives. True to his word at the board meeting, Michael had begun steering Thompson Industries towards more socially responsible ventures, starting with a major investment in animal welfare programs across the country. The merger with West Coast Tech was moving forward, but with a new focus. They were now developing cutting-edge prosthetics for both humans and animals, inspired by Huck's journey. The press had latched onto the story, dubbing it the Huck Effect, and public support for Thompson Industries was at an all-time high. However, not everyone was pleased with the new direction. As Michael scrolled through his emails, he noticed an increasing number of messages from concerned shareholders and industry traditionalists who felt he was straying too far from the company's core business model. One email in particular caught his attention. It was from Victor Blackwell, CEO of rival company Blackstar Enterprises. "Thompson, your recent antics have provided amusing headlines, but it's time to face reality. Business isn't about feel-good stories, it's about profit. You're putting your entire legacy at risk. If you continue down this path, you may find yourself facing more than just disgruntled shareholders. Consider this a friendly warning. VB." Michael frowned at the thinly veiled threat. He had known Victor for years, and the man had always been ruthlessly profit-driven. This new direction for Thompson Industries clearly threatened Blackstar's market position. As he pondered how to respond, a soft whine drew his attention. Huck had made his way into the office and was looking up at Michael with those soulful eyes. Smiling, Michael reached down to scratch behind Huck's ears. "What do you think, buddy? Should we be worried?" Huck's tail wagged in response, and Michael felt his resolve strengthen. He wouldn't be intimidated by Blackwell or anyone else who couldn't see the value in what they were trying to achieve. Over the next few weeks, Michael threw himself into his work with renewed vigor, all while helping Huck with his rehabilitation. The dog's progress was remarkable. Under the guidance of a top veterinary physiotherapist, Huck was gaining strength and confidence every day. One sunny afternoon, as Michael watched Huck navigate an obstacle course in the garden, Sarah arrived with exciting news. "Mr. Thompson, you won't believe this. Remember that school in the Bronx we donated to last month? They've invited you to speak at their career day. They want to hear about ethical business practices and corporate responsibility." Michael was taken aback. Public speaking had never been his forte, and he had always shied away from the limelight. But as he looked at Huck, determinedly tackling each obstacle despite his disability, he felt a surge of courage. "Tell them I'd be honored, Sarah," he said, surprising himself with his enthusiasm. The day of the school visit arrived, and Michael found himself standing before a sea of eager young faces. As he began to speak about his journey with Huck and the changes at Thompson Industries, he saw the students' eyes light up with interest and hope. One student raised her hand. "Mr. Thompson, do you really think big companies can make the world better?" My dad says it's all just for show. Michael paused, considering his words carefully. I believe they can, he said finally. It's not easy, and there will always be people who doubt you. But if we remember that business is about more than just making money, if we use our resources and influence to make a positive impact, then yes, we can make the world better, one decision at a time. As he left the school, Michael felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had started this journey to save one dog, but now he saw the potential for so much more. However, unbeknownst to Michael, his words at the school had reached beyond those young students. Victor Blackwell had sent an associate to observe the talk, and as the report landed on his desk, his eyes narrowed with determination. So Thompson wants to play the hero, Blackwell muttered to himself. Well, let's see how he handles a real crisis. As Michael drove home, feeling optimistic about the future, he was unaware of the storm brewing on the horizon. The true test of his new philosophy and of his bond with Huck was about to begin. The crisp autumn air had given way to winter's chill as Michael and Huck settled into their new routine. The dog's recovery had progressed remarkably, and he now moved around the estate with surprising agility on his 3 legs. Michael found himself drawing strength from Huck's resilience, especially as the challenges to his new business approach intensified. One frosty morning, as Michael sipped his coffee and scrolled through the day's news on his tablet, a headline made him nearly choke on his drink. Thompson Industries accused of animal testing cover-up. The article, published in a respected business journal, alleged that a subsidiary of Thompson Industries had been conducting unethical experiments on animals for years, all while the company publicly championed animal welfare. Anonymous sources claimed that Michael himself had been aware of these practices and had actively worked to conceal them. Michael's mind reeled. He knew with absolute certainty that these allegations were false, but the detail in the report was unsettling. As he dug deeper, he found that the story was spreading like wildfire across social media and news outlets. His phone began to ring incessantly. Board members, shareholders, partners, everyone wanted answers. Sarah burst into the room, her usually calm demeanor shaken. Mr. Thompson, we're being inundated with calls. The PR team is overwhelmed, and there are already protesters gathering outside our Manhattan office. Michael took a deep breath, trying to center himself. He looked over at Huck, who, sensing his distress, had come to rest his head on Michael's knee. Okay, Sarah, call an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. And get our legal team on this immediately. We need to find the source of these allegations. As Sarah left to make arrangements, Michael knelt down beside Huck. What do you think, buddy? Someone's trying to undo everything we've worked for. Huck's warm brown eyes looked up at him trustingly, and Michael felt a renewed sense of determination. We'll get through this. We have to. The board meeting was tense. Several members were calling for an immediate return to traditional business practices, arguing that Michael's new direction had made them vulnerable to such attacks. Others demanded a thorough internal investigation. Gentlemen, ladies, Michael addressed the room, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil. I assure you, these allegations are completely false. Yes, we need to investigate, but we also need to stand firm. If we abandon our principles at the first sign of trouble, what does that say about us? As the meeting adjourned, Michael felt the weight of skeptical gazes on his back. He knew he had a tough fight ahead. Over the next few days, the situation escalated. Protesters picketed Thompson Industries offices across the country. Several longtime business partners suspended their contracts pending investigation. The company's stock took a nosedive. Through it all, Michael worked tirelessly to uncover the truth. He brought in independent auditors to examine every aspect of the company's operations. He made himself available for interviews, consistently denying the allegations while promising full transparency. One evening, exhausted from another day of crisis management, Michael returned home to find an unexpected visitor waiting for him. It was Dr. Emily Chen, the veterinarian who had saved Huck's life. Dr. Chen, what brings you here? Michael asked, surprised. She smiled wryly. I thought you could use a friendly face, and I brought someone who might cheer you up even more. She stepped aside to reveal a young golden retriever with a prosthetic leg, one of the first recipients of the new line of animal prosthetics, developed by Thompson Industries and West Coast Tech. This is Sunny, Dr. Chen explained. Thanks to your company's work, she's able to run and play like any other dog. I thought you should see firsthand the good you're doing, especially now." As Michael watched Sonny and Huck playfully chase each other around the garden, he felt a glimmer of hope. This was why he had chosen this path, to make a real, tangible difference. His moment of peace was interrupted by an urgent call from Sarah. "Mr. Thompson, we've found something. You need to see this right away." Michael rushed to his home office, where Sarah had sent over a series of encrypted emails. As he read through them, his expression hardened. The trail of evidence led back to none other than Victor Blackwell and Black Star Enterprises. "He orchestrated the whole thing," Michael murmured, a mix of anger and relief washing over him. But why go to such lengths? As if in answer to his question, another email popped up, this one from Blackwell himself. "Thompson, impressive detective work. But ask yourself this, in a world where perception is reality, does the truth even matter anymore? You've already lost the public's trust. It's time to face facts. Your little experiment in corporate responsibility has failed. Be smart. Sell to me now, before there's nothing left to salvage. You have 48 hours to respond. VB." Michael leaned back in his chair, the full weight of the situation hitting him. Blackwell had orchestrated this entire scandal to force a sale, to bring down everything Michael had built. As he contemplated his next move, Huck padded into the room, resting his head on Michael's lap. Looking into the dog's trusting eyes, Michael made his decision. He wouldn't give up, not on Huck, not on his father's legacy, and not on the belief that business could be a force for good. "Sarah," he called, a new determination in his voice. "Set up a press conference for tomorrow morning. It's time we fought back." As Michael began to plan his counterattack, he knew that the next 48 hours would define not just his future, but the future of Thompson Industries and everything they stood for. The real battle was just beginning. The morning of the press conference dawned cold and grey, matching the somber mood at Thompson Industries. Michael stood before the mirror, adjusting his tie and steeling himself for the battle ahead. Huck sat nearby, his steady presence a comfort in the storm. "Ready, buddy?" Michael asked, giving Huck a gentle pat. The dog's tail wagged in response, as if understanding the gravity of the moment. As Michael's car pulled up to the company headquarters, he was met with a sea of reporters and protesters. Camera flashes exploded like lightning, and a cacophony of shouted questions filled the air. Taking a deep breath, Michael stepped out, his face a mask of calm determination. Inside, Sarah briefed him one last time. "Remember, Mr. Thompson, we have the evidence of Blackwell's involvement. Our legal team advises caution in how we present it, but they believe it's solid." Michael nodded, his mind already racing ahead to the speech he had prepared. As he stepped onto the podium, facing the assembled press and a live streaming audience of millions, he felt a moment of doubt. Then he remembered Huck's unwavering trust, and his resolve hardened. "Good morning," he began, his voice steady. "Over the past week, Thompson Industries has been accused of heinous acts that go against everything we stand for. Today, I'm here to set the record straight." He paused, looking directly into the cameras. "The allegations against us are not just false. They are a deliberate and malicious attempt to undermine the positive changes we've been making. We have irrefutable evidence that these accusations were fabricated by our competitors, specifically Black Star Enterprises, under the direction of Victor Blackwell." A gasp rippled through the audience. Michael continued, his voice growing stronger. "But this isn't just about corporate rivalry. This is about the future of business itself. For too long, we've accepted the idea that companies must choose between profit and social responsibility. I'm here to tell you that this is a false choice." He went on to detail the successes of Thompson Industries' new initiatives, the animals saved by their prosthetics program, the communities improved by their investments, the environmental gains from their sustainable practices. Yes, we've faced challenges. Yes, change is difficult. But I ask you this, what kind of world do we want to live in? One where corporations exist solely to enrich shareholders, or one where they are a force for positive change? As Michael spoke, something remarkable began to happen. Social media exploded with support. Stand with Thompson began trending worldwide. People shared stories of how Thompson Industries' initiatives had touched their lives. In a dramatic moment, Michael invited Dr. Chen to the stage, along with Sunny, the dog with the prosthetic leg. "This is the real face of Thompson Industries," he declared. "Not shadowy labs or corporate greed, but innovation that improves lives, human and animal alike." As the press conference concluded, Michael felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. He had laid everything on the line, and now all he could do was wait to see how the world would respond. The response came swiftly and overwhelmingly. Within hours, major news outlets were running stories on Blackwell's deception. Thompson Industries stock, which had been in freefall, began to rebound. Partners who had distanced themselves reached out to reaffirm their commitment. But the most significant reaction came from an unexpected quarter. As Michael was leaving the office that evening, he received a call from Gregory Walters of West Coast Tech. "Thompson," Walters said, his voice filled with a newfound respect, "I've got to hand it to you. You didn't just weather this storm, you've changed the game. Our board has been in emergency meetings all day, and we've come to a decision. We want to accelerate our merger and expand our joint initiatives. We believe your vision is the future of business." Michael was stunned. This was more than just a corporate victory. It was validation of everything he had been fighting for. As he drove home, his phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Turn on the news, now." Pulling into his driveway, Michael rushed inside and flicked on the television. There, breaking across all major networks, was footage of Victor Blackwell being led out of Blackstar Enterprises in handcuffs. The headline read, "Blackstar CEO arrested on charges of corporate espionage and fraud." Michael sank into his armchair, overwhelmed by the day's events. Huck, sensing his emotion, came and rested his head on Michael's lap. As he absently stroked the dog's ears, Michael realized that this was more than just a personal or corporate victory. It was a turning point, a moment that could reshape the very nature of business and its role in society. But as the adrenaline of the day began to fade, Michael also knew that the real work was just beginning. He had won the battle, but changing the corporate world would be a long and challenging war. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice reminded him that there were always new threats, new challenges on the horizon. For now, though, he allowed himself a moment of peace, grateful for the unlikely companion who had started him on this journey. "We did it, Huck," he murmured. "We really did it." As the night settled in, Michael began to plan for the future, a future that, thanks to a three-legged dog and a rediscovered sense of purpose, looked brighter than he ever could have imagined. In the months following the press conference and Blackwell's arrest, Thompson Industries underwent a transformation that rippled through the corporate world. The merger with West Coast Tech was finalized, creating a powerhouse of ethical innovation that quickly became the gold standard in corporate responsibility. Michael found himself busier than ever, but it was a different kind of busy, purposeful, energizing, and deeply satisfying. He split his time between the boardroom and various community projects, always with Huck by his side. The dog had become something of a mascot for the company, a living symbol of resilience and the power of compassion. One crisp spring morning, Michael and Huck were visiting a local animal shelter that had partnered with Thompson Industries. As they walked through the facility, Michael was struck by how much had changed in such a short time. The shelter, once struggling to keep its doors open, was now a state-of-the-art rehabilitation center for injured and abandoned animals. "Mr. Thompson," called out Emma, the shelter's director, her face beaming, "I have someone I'd like you to meet." She led them to a quiet corner where a small, trembling dog huddled in a bed. The dog's left front leg was missing, and its eyes were filled with fear. "This is Luna," Emma explained softly. "She was rescued from a terrible situation last week. We were hoping you might consider giving her a home. She needs someone who understands what she's been through." Michael knelt down, his heart aching for the frightened animal. Huck, sensing the moment's importance, gently approached Luna, nuzzling her softly. To everyone's surprise, Luna's tail gave a tentative wag. "I think that's a yes," Michael said, smiling as he watched the two dogs interact. "It looks like you're coming home with us, Luna." As they left the shelter, Michael's phone buzzed with a notification. It was an alert about a breaking news story. Several major corporations, inspired by Thompson Industries' success, had announced new initiatives focusing on social and environmental responsibility. Michael felt a surge of pride and hope. The change he had dreamed of was starting to take root across the business world. But he also knew that there was still much work to be done. Back at the office, Sarah greeted him with a stack of papers. "The board is loving the latest numbers," she reported. "Our ethical initiatives aren't just good PR. They're driving real growth. And there's more. We've been invited to speak at the World Economic Forum about our business model." Michael nodded, his mind already racing with the possibilities. "Sarah, I think it's time we took this to the next level. Let's start a foundation, something that can help other companies transition to more ethical practices. We can offer grants, consultation, whatever it takes to spread this model." As they began to brainstorm, Michael glanced out the window. In the small garden area outside his office, he could see Huck and Luna playing together, both moving with a grace that belied their physical challenges. It struck him then, the beautiful simplicity of it all, how one small act of kindness had set off a chain reaction that was now changing the world. That evening, as Michael sat in his study reviewing plans for the new foundation, he received an unexpected call. It was from Victor Blackwell. "Thompson." Blackwell's voice crackled over the line, sounding older and more subdued than Michael remembered. I owe you an apology. I've had a lot of time to think in here, and I realize now how wrong I was. The way you've changed things, it's remarkable." Michael listened in stunned silence as Blackwell continued. "I know I have no right to ask this, but when I get out, I'd like to help. To make amends. If you'll have me, that is." For a moment, Michael was at a loss for words. Then he thought of Huck, of Luna, of all the lives they'd touched. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Victor," he said finally. "When you're ready, there'll be a place for you in our foundation." As he ended the call, Michael felt a sense of completion. The circle that had begun with rescuing a broken dog in his garden had grown to encompass not just his company, but an entire movement. And now it was even offering redemption to the man who had once been his greatest enemy. Huck and Luna padded into the study, curling up at Michael's feet. As he looked down at them, Michael realized that this was just the beginning. The ripple effect of compassion and ethical business was spreading, and he was excited to see where it would lead next. But even as he dreamed of the future, Michael knew that challenges would always arise. The world was changing rapidly, and with change came new obstacles and responsibilities. As he petted both dogs, feeling their steady warmth, he steeled himself for whatever might come next. The journey that had begun with one act of kindness had transformed into a mission that would span years, perhaps even generations. And Michael Thompson, once a lonely billionaire, now found himself at the heart of a movement that was redefining the very nature of success in the modern world. 5 years had passed since the fateful day Michael Thompson found Huck in his garden. The world had changed dramatically, and Thompson Industries had been at the forefront of that change. On a warm summer morning, Michael stood at the podium of a grand auditorium, addressing a diverse crowd of business leaders, activists, and students. It was the opening of the Thompson Center for Ethical Business, a sprawling campus dedicated to research, education, and incubation of socially responsible enterprises. "When I rescued a 3-legged dog named Huck," Michael began, his voice carrying across the hushed audience, "I had no idea that it would lead to this moment. But that single act of compassion sparked a journey that has transformed not just my life, but the very landscape of global business." As he spoke, Michael's eyes swept across the front row. There sat Huck and Luna, older now but still vibrant, wearing vests that identified them as therapy dogs. Beside them was Sarah, now the COO of Thompson Industries, and Dr. Chen, who headed the company's biotech division. And there, in a suit that seemed to hang loosely on his frame, sat Victor Blackwell, who had become an ardent advocate for corporate reform after serving his sentence. "We've proven that compassion and profit are not mutually exclusive," Michael continued. "In fact, they're intrinsically linked. When we invest in our communities, in our environment, in the well-being of all living creatures, we create a world that's not just more ethical, but more prosperous for everyone." He went on to outline the achievements of the past 5 years. The dramatic reduction in animal testing across industries, the development of sustainable technologies that were revolutionizing energy production, the creation of fair labor practices that had improved lives in communities around the world. "But our work is far from over," Michael declared, his voice rising with passion. "As we face unprecedented global challenges, climate change, inequality, technological disruption, the role of ethical business becomes more crucial than ever. As he concluded his speech to thunderous applause, Michael felt a mixture of pride and humility. The movement he had helped start had grown beyond his wildest dreams, but he knew that it was the collective effort of countless individuals that had made it possible. After the ceremony, as Michael walked through the campus grounds with Huck and Luna at his side, he was approached by a young student. "Mr. Thompson," the student said, her eyes shining with admiration, "your story inspired me to change my major to ethical business practices. But do you really think one person can make a difference in such a big world?" Michael smiled, kneeling down to pet Huck and Luna. "Look at these two," he said softly. Huck was a stray, left for dead. Luna was rescued from abuse. Now they're therapy dogs, bringing joy and healing to hundreds of people. Never underestimate the power of one act of kindness, one decision to do the right thing. It can start a ripple that turns into a wave. As the student walked away, visibly moved, Michael's phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah. "Turn on the news." Curious, Michael pulled out his tablet and opened a news feed. The headline made his heart skip a beat. "Global Coalition of Corporations pledges $1 trillion investment in sustainable development." As he read through the article, Michael realized that many of the companies involved had been directly influenced by Thompson Industries' model or had participated in programs at the new Ethical Business Center. Overwhelmed with emotion, Michael found a quiet bench and sat down, Huck and Luna settling at his feet. He thought back to that cold autumn day when he had found Huck, how close he had come to simply calling animal control, how different the world might be if he had made that choice. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the campus, Michael Thompson realized that his true legacy wasn't the buildings around him, or even the global movement he had helped spark. It was the simple truth he had learned from a three-legged dog, that compassion, when coupled with action, had the power to change the world. With renewed determination, Michael stood up. There was still so much to do, so many challenges to face. But as he walked back toward the center, Huck and Luna trotting faithfully by his side, he knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together, one step, one act of kindness at a time.